Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for the first of what we hope will be a whole series of meetings to keep you, our supporters, fully informed and allow you an opportunity to question us. There will be an opportunity during this webinar to ask questions. For those of you who don't know how to do that, we're going to do it using the chat function. If you look at the bottom of the page, you'll find where it says chat. If you just press that, and you will find a button, you'll find a bit on there which says to, and probably look for all panelists, and then just type your message here. So I hope you can make that work. Please do ask us questions. We're going to be very happy to answer them when it comes to the panel. So again, thank you all very much for joining us. 2020, as you all know, has been an extraordinary year for us, as it has for you. We've faced challenges the like of which we've never seen before at a time when seafarers and their families have never needed us more. Many of you have been involved in helping us maintain our service, our ministry, through these dark months, and we are so grateful to you all. It's been a time of amazing energy and creativity, and I am so proud of our teams across the world and here in London. You'll hear more in a moment, but we've sustained our work wherever that's been possible. Ship visiting at the gangway, supplying vitally needed personal supplies for crew, including medicines. Digital care services, including the swiftly launched Chat to a Chaplain facility. The vital helping hand of our family support networks in the Philippines and India. Practical help to seafarers trapped in foreign ports, and in partnership with the wider industry, we've played our full part in the advocacy and lobbying, which despite many frustrations has had at least some impact. We continue to plead the case for seafarers and their families. And we also seek the universal recognition of our own maritime welfare frontline workers as a vital resource for seafarers. They too are key workers. They need to be able to carry on their work unhindered, especially in view of the very strong measures we've taken to ensure absolute safety for our ship visitors, but also for, very importantly, for our seafarers, the seafarers we look after. We do work, as we have since 1856, under the sign of the Flying Angel. And I'd just like to quote from one recently received letter. It was actually sent to our team in Hong Kong, but it refers to our teams across the world and takes up that theme of angels. And I quote it just as it is. They help people like us who are deprived from going outside these metal structures. They offer assistance from small favors like buying personal items, such as toothpastes, to bridging the gap of sending money to our homes. Angels sure are amazing. All these kindnesses are done voluntarily, not expecting things in return, and yet they will pour out their best efforts to help for us. With them, this pandemic is not as tragic as it should be. Seafaring is not as lonely as it used to be. And being extended in contract is not as sad as it was. This letter is made to appreciate all the Seamen's Mission volunteers in each port around the world. They left the safety of their homes to serve people whom they barely know, living a life with people who speaks different from them and enduring all the foreign cultural barriers with it. I am forever grateful for all the favors that you did for me and my crewmates. The stories I hear all the time have been deeply moving, and I'm so glad we've been able to play our part in offering transformational support to seafarers and to their families at this extraordinary time. It's been an inspiring time to be Secretary General, and I will never forget these last months and the service which so many have rendered. We salute the heroism of seafarers, and we salute too all those who have stood alongside them and advocated for them in the midst of significant darkness. We have learned so much through these months. I think that our communication, both internally and externally, has improved markedly. We've had high levels of interest from international media. I've probably had more conversations digitally than I ever do in normal times when I'm so often on the road. I speak regularly with colleagues in the London team, all working so effectively from home, with our regional leadership across the world, with our regional teams, and with so many friends and partners from across the shipping industry and beyond. Our online Sea Sunday service in the summer was a huge success, attracting an audience of thousands to a service which felt so inclusive and reflected our work across the world. Our carol service will also be online. Recently, we held our international awards ceremony, which should have been at a dinner in Singapore, but instead was held digitally, accessible to everyone, and indeed attracted an extraordinarily high-powered range of nominations. Close to 200 people joined that event, probably more, given that some shipping company offices joined in with many people focused on one screen. This meeting is a direct descendant of these discoveries, launching what we hope will be regular opportunities to keep all our supporters well informed and to allow you to ask us questions and indeed make us accountable to you who sustain our work through your care, your generosity, and your prayers. But first, we're going to hear from the group most important to us, seafarers themselves. Here are a few of their voices telling something of their experience over these last months. With crew change so difficult, upwards of 400,000 have been working beyond their contract, sometimes way beyond their contracts, with uncertainty, anxiety about family, exhaustion, and that sense of losing control over your own destiny, creating high levels of stress. This has combined with severe limitations on shore leave. Let's hear from some seafarers.
Working at sea during the COVID-19 pandemic is quite challenging because we need to comply with the market pressure and we need to provide the safety of the crew regarding with this virus.
We adopt the new norm. At first it's a discomfort, yet well it's for the better. Working on board during this pandemic lets us value more of our well-being, value more of our lifestyle, and value more our work. Knowing that we are here at sea and mostly away from the rest of everybody is not an excuse. Self-awareness is the key. And following safety guidelines, though again, will bring a little discomfort, but well as what our company reminds us always is safety first.
So there's no more passenger and it's very hard because we have to call back home with our family.
It's like you don't know what's going to happen. There is fear of getting sick, and I can still see my family.
For me, working at sea during the pandemic, it's a great blessing that I have a job so that I can continue to provide for my family needs. However, there are also instances where it worries me because it is hard to be away with your family during this pandemic.
I really want to go ashore. Yeah, I really want to see the cities, different countries. But because of COVID-19 pandemic, it restricted everything.
It's very difficult if you've been affected with the virus, but I always pray to God. I've been locked down in Cebu for 1 month and like 15 days, 1.5 months. So it's very difficult for me to get back to my province because of some regulations.
My biggest concern is that most of the crew will spend more times on board rather at home because of this hindrance that we are facing right now. So it affects their mental state.
And what has been my biggest concern is of course our physical and mental health. So stay healthy and stay positive.
Well, it could be my mental state. Well, as our company is trying hard to keep things going, yet some things are inevitable. In my case, my contract has been extended for a couple of times. I've never been on shore leave to unwind, and at times I felt burnout.
Of course, we are scared. As you heard, many seafarers have been infected in this kind of virus. That's why me, myself, and others are following the safety protocols and instruction given by our good company.
My concern in these pandemic times is, as frontliners at sea, it's been very risky to us visiting ports that has high cases of COVID. Struggles of crew change has been an issue because of only limited ports allowed crew change, and it affects the well-being of us seafarers.
And finally, I have always high hopes that all of this will end. Yes, all of this will end.
Good afternoon. Hello, everybody, wherever you are around the world, and thank you for joining us. I'm afraid that I seem to have a problem with my camera, which all of a sudden is not working. So apologies for there we are. It's really good to have you with us, and thank you for joining us. I think as that video that we've just seen shows, there have been many dark days in this pandemic, but there is also cause for hope that one day this period will end and life will return to a new normal. As Andrew has said, because of supporters like you, the Mission to Seafarers has been able to reach out and support the world's crews during these most troubled of days. And before we focus on our Middle East and South Asia region today, I wanted to provide you with an international snapshot of our work. Perhaps the most visible sign of the Mission to Seafarers is our network of port chaplains in 200 ports across 50 countries. Throughout the pandemic, we have been the only charity, the maritime charity, to continue to provide port services and only have stopped when required to do so by national lockdown or other authority. As a result, we have been pleased to maintain chaplaincies in around 40% of our network, providing a range of much needed direct resources and support to seafarers. Our ship visiting teams have been working to a strict set of protocols, which include maintaining social distancing, sanitizing hands and vehicles, and wearing face coverings. In ports where we have been able to operate, teams have visited crews at the gangway and delivered MiFi units as well as data cards for personal use. Care packages, often containing the famous woolly hats that so many of you spend time knitting for us, have been prepared in strict hygienic conditions before being donated. Andrew has already mentioned the important work some of our teams have carried out in collecting life-sustaining medication, and this has been particularly important for seafarers living with HIV, who, because of a restriction on shore leave, have been unable to get ashore and have their prescriptions repeated and refilled. Other chaplaincies have been pleased to fulfill orders for shopping. Many seafarers, as I've said, are currently denied shore leave or unwilling to take it for fear of catching COVID-19. Our teams have therefore been pleased to visit all manner of stores in order to pick up supplies, additional food, local specialities, items of technology, and many, many bars of chocolate. We have invested heavily in making our seafarers centres as COVID safe as they can be. All of our 121 Flying Angel clubs have undergone a deep clean. We have installed hand sanitizer and protective screens. We've rearranged furniture to ensure social distancing. And in the UK alone, we've distributed 27,000 items of PPE to ensure that we can support seafarers well into next year in a safe way. Of course, a rolling series of lockdowns across the world has meant that our centres have had to close and reopen in line with national legislation. But if seafarers can't get to the centre, we take the shops and the centre to them, and in some ports our mobile shops have been providing quayside services. Within 5 weeks of lockdown 1 being announced in the UK, I should say, we launched a digital chaplaincy service. Chat to a Chaplain offers seafarers the chance to speak with one of our chaplains at any time, 24 hours a day. The service features over 30 chaplaincy teams based around the world who are on hand to offer pastoral counselling and support to seafarers. It was important for us that the service reflected the diverse range of welfare services available, and so, as such, we've partnered with other maritime charities to allow some of their teams to also take part. To date, we've received over 1,600 requests for help and advice and have worked on more than 600 cases. Many of the interactions have been consoling seafarers working on extended contracts and desperate to go home. Others have been more serious, and when Reverend Knitting comes to speak to you later, I'm sure he will want to share with you some of the experiences that he's had of working on the system. But particularly, I think the service can be summed up by a seafarer who recently wrote to us after his situation had been resolved, thanks to the chaplains, and he said, "Thanks for being such an incredible caretaker for us during our desperate situation. It was a really magnificent deed that you did. Hats off and thanks a lot." Like many organisations, elements of our digital strategy have been brought forward because of the pandemic. Our well-known Seafarers Happiness Index has provided seafarers with an outlet to tell industry how they feel and the impact that the pandemic is having on their mental and physical well-being. In addition to that, we're also now developing a Seafarers app, which will provide mental health, signposting and advice, as well as practical tips to help support seafarers, support themselves during their time away from those natural support structures of family and friends. Our family networks have been in high demand as crew families turn to us for help. In Manila, we operate a sizable family support network spread across 9 chapters, where family members can come together to share, learn new skills, and to support each other. Our teams have been holding online seminars with families since the beginning of the pandemic. Many of these have been joyous occasions as people of all ages have gathered to share news from their region, build community, sing songs, and learn from experts. In one session, a wellness expert was brought in to lead meditation and breathing exercises. In another, a seafarers' kids band was formed and children recorded songs which they sent to their seafaring parents on board. In Manila, we were asked by the government to help in transporting seafarers who had finished their mandatory quarantine. And for the many seafarers living in the city's overcrowded seafarer dormitories, we have been providing food and water so that they could maintain a nutritious diet. Elsewhere in the Philippines, the mission has been supporting its Flying Angel cadets at a maritime college. Like many across the world, these students have suffered significant disruption to their studies this year, and we have been supporting them and their families. All of our cadets come from disadvantaged backgrounds, and just last week they returned to the college. It reopened, and they have now they're now continuing with their 4-year engineering courses. On arrival, welcome packs were waiting for them from the Mission to Seafarers, and when it's safe to do so, our teams will provide pastoral visits as well as deliver training in mental health and financial literacy. The examples I cite here today are perhaps particularly eye-catching, but none of this would have been possible without the generous support from people like you. On behalf of my colleagues in ports and communities around the world, thank you so much for affording us the privilege to support seafarers and their families in this way.
Thank you very much, Ben. That's great. And we're now coming to what might be the heart of our seminar this morning, the chance to go over and meet people at the front line. And I'm very, very pleased to introduce Canon Andy Bauman, who's the Regional Director for our Middle East and South Asia team. And Andy is also the Senior Chaplain in Dubai. Andy has a great passion and abundant skills for this work, with a background in the cutting edge of Anglican social justice work, quite apart from being chaplain of Southampton Football Club. He's doing great work as regional director and in relation especially to the justice issues faced by many seafarers in the Gulf. And he's joined today by two of his team from India, and I'm going to hand over to Andy and allow him to introduce the other members of the team. Andy.
Thank you, Andrew, and let me add my welcome to those of everybody else with a good afternoon from Dubai, where I'm sure those of you in England won't want to know that it's yet another beautiful blue sky. I've already had the chance to swim in the sea this morning, and I'm looking forward to a stroll along the seafront this evening. It's my privilege to lead the work of the Mission to Seafarers in the Middle East and South Asia. And here we work in 16 ports across 5 countries. Aqaba in Jordan in the west to Chennai in India in the east. And in fact, we've been in the Middle East for a very long time. We first sent our first 4 chaplains to the region back in 1885. We've been in the UAE or in Dubai since 1962, which means we precede the formation of the United Arab Emirates, which means we've built a lot of what in the Arab world they call wasta, a lot of reputation. And we have a great reputation for caring for seafarers, whatever their rank, whatever their background, whatever their faith. Our wasta, our reputation is that we are the ones who will always be there for people, whether their need is something really small or something very deeply significant and traumatic. And all we want to offer you this morning are 3 vignettes of our work during the pandemic. We're going to go to South India, to the port city of Tuticorin, where Reverend Isaac Franklin and his team have been providing humanitarian aid to families. We'll then move back across India to Mumbai, home to the Gate of India and the busy JMPT port. And I'll interview the Reverend Nitin Detti about his experience of lockdown in Mumbai, but also some of the virtual support that he's been giving to seafarers via the online Chat to a Chaplain service that you've been hearing about. And finally, we'll come back here to the UAE and consider what's been happening with some of the significant cases of injustice around the Arabian Gulf. I hope you've got your coffee ready, perhaps a cheeky piece of cake or a biscuit, and we'll first head back to the south of India and see how the Reverend Franklin and his team have been making a huge impact on their community during the past few months.
There are more than 12,000 seafarers families and more than 40,000 fishermen families in Tuticorin. The COVID-19 lockdown in Tuticorin affected the families of seafaring and fishing community to a great extent. The continuous restriction in the movement of trade vehicles and the closure of shops during this COVID-19 lockdown period have led to the escalation of the price of essential food materials. Many seafarers have been forced to remain jobless at home. At this difficult time, the Samaritans Fund as well as the Seafarers UK grant from the Mission to Seafarers International Headquarters in London has been a great support to feed these poor families affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. Through the help of our volunteers and local priests, we identified the needy families, especially the big and joint families with a sole breadwinner and families having widows, aged and sick people. With period permission from the district collector and local police station, we fixed the dates and venues for the distribution of the food materials and personal protective equipment to the needy families. We ensure that the safety guidelines issued by the government, such as keeping social distancing, wearing face masks, washing hands with sanitation, etc., were strictly followed. The families who received the food bags and the PPE items were very grateful and they profusely thanked the Mission to Seafarers.
You'll get to meet Reverend Franklin live a little bit later on because he's going to be joining our panel for the Q&A, which is just a good chance for me to remind people, if you've got any questions, however trivial they seem, that you'd like to ask any of the people you've seen presenting, then please do pop those into the chat box and we'd love to try and answer them. Next, I'm joined by the Reverend Nitin, who's in Mumbai. And Nitin has been really enthusiastically engaging with the work of Chat to a Chaplain. But I thought first, if we can get Nitin to just pop his microphone on and his video on, that I might get the chance to interview him about what life has been like during the lockdown in Mumbai. Nitin, are you there? Here he comes.
Yes, Reverend Andy.
Good morning, Nitin. Wonderful to see you.
Good morning, Reverend Andy, and good morning to everybody who has joined together for this wonderful occasion with Mission to Seafarers.
Nitin, I wonder for those, many of whom have joined, I think there are some on from India, but I think many have joined from the UK. Perhaps just tell us a little bit about how you and your wife and your daughter have been impacted by the lockdown in Mumbai. Perhaps describe some of the things that you have or haven't been able to do, perhaps some of the things the government have imposed or restrictions that are upon you that have happened during these past 6-9 months.
As you know, during the pandemic, in most of the places across the world, there has been lockdowns. Similarly, we had a lockdown in Mumbai and India as well. And during this time, it was quite difficult for us. We couldn't go out, and we were, confined to our homes for, months together. And it was very difficult because we couldn't meet seafarers or go out and, reach out in the way that we usually naturally would go and, do. Schools, colleges were closed. So, the government started online schools and colleges, classes, and work from home started for almost everybody, wherever possible.
Nitin, I know that, what people won't know is that for you, that meant, I think you're on the 8th floor, is that right? Of your apartment?
7th floor.
7th floor of your apartment building, you, your wife, your daughter, and from memory, you were only actually allowed out maybe on 1 or 2 days in a week to go and get vital provisions at certain times.
Yes, we were only given certain times when we could go out and, get our provisions. So those were difficult days.
But despite that, you've managed to sort of find a new way to engage with seafarers, staying just in your front room. So perhaps for those who are joining us, you could just describe what's the process for engaging on Chat to a Chaplain. You wake up, you open your phone, or you open your laptop. Tell us what happens during the process.
For the Chat with the Chaplain initiative, this is a very good initiative which the Mission to Seafarers started. So what I usually do is when I get up in the morning, I log into the system and log into the chat, and I log in on my computer, on my laptop, as well as on my phone. So in both the places. What I have noticed is I get a lot many calls in the morning during the early hours. So this has been over a period of time, I have noticed this. So early mornings and late evenings is the time when seafarers, reach out to us the most, according to the Indian time.
What sort of questions are they asking you, Nitin? What's the most common thing you get asked?
When we started initially, it was seafarers, they were stuck on the vessels. So they were, reaching out and saying that their contracts are over and they want to go home. So they were wanting sign-offs, but this was not happening because international travel was stopped. No international flights happening. People couldn't go out of the ports, no sign-offs. And the bigger problem was for them to sign off, there had to be people who could sign on. So since there were no sign-ons happening, there were no sign-offs. So people were stuck. Seafarers who were stuck on the vessel, they were there, and those at home, they were at home. So that was a very difficult time for seafarers.
Now, I know you engaged with our wider team and inspired us with some of the particular stories. And from memory, there was a story where there was a seafarer stuck a long way from home in China, and you offered some particular help to assist him. Perhaps you could just describe that story for us.
Certainly. One morning, I received a chat message from a seafarer and who was stuck on a vessel in China. So what he said was that he has been sick for 3 weeks now, but there is absolutely no medical help that he's getting, not from the captain or anybody else. So I asked him for his details. He was very depressed, And I asked him, don't worry, we will try and help you and we'll see what we can do the best for him. So I took down his details. I took down the details of his agents and the company. I emailed the company, the agent, the local agent in China, and I asked them, requested them, to, attend to the needs of the seafarer. At the same time, I also, messaged to our Hong Kong office, the Mission to Seafarer office. So we reached out to them, and I was in touch with the seafarer. And on the third day, I got a message, an email from the seafarer saying that now he's seeing some movement towards, something that they want to do for him, some help like. And then even though they were in the port, the company had not provided for a medical doctor to come and check on board. So that's why he was very depressed, and they were not taking him to the hospital as well. So after I think the third or fourth day, he wrote that they have made arrangements for the doctor to come in and, attend to his medical needs. And I think after that, he said that he's got his medical treatment, and he's very happy, for all the support. In fact, if you give me permission, I'll just like to quote from what he said.
Yes, please.
His name is John. He was a Filipino, he's a Filipino seafarer, the chief officer. He says, I'm very grateful to you and the Mission to Seafarers. With your prayers and prompt action, many, many more lives at sea will be saved. And I was one of those. Thank you so much for being the channel of God as an answer to my prayers of healing. It is true that when two or more people pray together, the impossible becomes possible. May God continue to shower his blessing of health, wealth, and abundance to all of you and your team. That is the mission to the seafarers. So we're really encouraged. He got the treatment and he was very happy for that.
Wonderful, Nitin. What a great story that there you are, locked down, stuck in the 7th floor apartment in Mumbai, helping a Filipino seafarer who's stuck in China in need of medication. That's exactly the sort of thing that the Chat to a Chaplain and this virtual service allows us to do. Nitin will also be on the panel, so if you've got any more questions about how Chat to a Chaplain is working, he'll be back on later on. Nitin, if I just ask you to mute and close off your video, that would be great. We're going to now come back to the UAE. In the UAE, we have permission to visit 8 of the ports, some of them amongst the busiest ports in the world. And much of our work is just the bread and butter of the Mission to Seafarers, visiting ships and providing support to seafarers as they come and go through the ports. But here, for particular reasons, we also seem to have a significant caseload of welfare and justice cases. That might be seafarers in need of counselling, family support back home, perhaps they need medical care. And on a typical month, we may run with a caseload of 60 or 70 seafarers from perhaps 11 or 12 ships who need some more significant support from us. We noticed fairly quickly as the pandemic began to take hold across the world that caseload began to grow exponentially. We now have a caseload which averages at about 200 seafarers from maybe 30 or 35 different ships. The ones which are most significant are those seafarers who find themselves abandoned. And I just wanted to tell you 2 stories in the time that I have remaining of where there is hope, even when it appears sometimes to be hopeless. To be abandoned, a seafarer has not received provisions, not received wages, or not had communication from his company for a period of 2 months. And at any one time, we may have 6 or 7 vessels where this is the case. 2 particular are relevant to me at the moment. You join me as just an hour ago received the news that the 14 Sri Lankan seafarers on the MT Nereus have received 100% of their wages and will be repatriated to Colombo on Saturday, which is fantastic news, particularly when you know that they have been stuck, at least in port, but at the port of Dubai Maritime City since the end of January. In that time, they've not been paid. The company's not provided them with provisions. And so we have been engaging to make sure that they have those very basics. And one of the ways you can translate the word mission in Arabic is for it to be a gift or a present. And so for those seafarers, we've made regular visits to ensure that not just are they fed, but also that emotionally and mentally they are being sustained. We've done things like been able to send home gifts or cards to families back in Sri Lanka. We've been able to use our chaplain in Sri Lanka to pay visits to families back home. So I shall look forward to finishing this call and getting onto WhatsApp and sending messages to him to ensure that everybody back home knows that the seafarers will soon be on their way. So that's great news. But we also have cases which seem to go on forever. The MT Iber is one of those cases. The MT Iber found themselves asked or requested to go to Anchorage by their company some 28 months ago. Little did they know that the company was in financial difficulties. And so significant were those financial difficulties that the crew have remained at anchor for the past 28 months. They've been unpaid. They have received very few provisions, and they have been desperate to find a way to get themselves repatriated and to seek justice for the unpaid contracts that they have. The 5 seafarers are 3 Indians, 1 Pakistani, and the chief engineer from Myanmar. We visit them regularly. We communicate with their families, and we lobby on their behalf with the authorities here in the UAE. Maritime legislation is complex here, and their vessel has now been arrested, but that can mean anything up to 18 months through the court process for them to receive what they are due. And then they are just a long list of creditors who are owed monies. Our job is to keep making sure that they are not forgotten, even though they are abandoned, to keep presenting their story to the authorities. Sometimes the work is difficult, it can be challenging and can lead to periods of reflection. If it's working, I understand there may be some sort of technical difficulties going on. We'd quite like to show you just a short video, which is me reflecting on a visit to the MT Iber just last week and pondering what's happened in the world during that period of time. 2 of the seafarers, as you'll hear, are the same age as I am. They've been under contract for 40 months, so not been home for 40 months, and have been unpaid for 28 months. If we can make it work, let's see my reflection on the way back from the MT Iber.
So we're on our way back, having been to the Iber. My immediate thoughts are around Naiwin and Risat Ali, chief engineer and second engineer on board. Both been with the company 40 months away from home. 27 and 28 of those respectively unpaid. And I guess my immediate thoughts are all that's happened in the last 40 months, all the things that they've missed. I mean, perhaps some of those are not so bad things. They've been on board for all of what's gone on with coronavirus. But I just think in my own life, they're both the same age as me. I think all those things in my family, all those life milestones that have gone on over the past 40 months. 40 months ago, my eldest daughter got married. Since then, we've had our first grandchild. Over the past 40 months, both of my in-laws, my mother and my father-in-law, have sadly died. We've been through all of that grief and that loss. I've moved house. I've moved continent to be here in the UAE. So many holidays, moments of laughter, moments of sadness, but moments of life that I'll remember forever. And yet these seafarers have just been on board, waiting, and that's that sense of just waiting, being afloat, being adrift, and hoping and praying that somebody will continue fighting for them, continue speaking on their behalf. And yeah, the weather here today is beautiful. I'm on a speedboat going back. It's something people would pay good money for here in and around the UAE to do. yeah, really what I want to do is to get those 5 seafarers on board this small craft and just bring them home and head them back to their families. Anyway, I'll ponder some more.
Thank you, Andy. That's really inspiring. And yes, sorry that that video is a little bit jerky, but we could hear you very clearly. And that was an extremely moving and thought-provoking reflection. Thank you so much, Andy, and to your team for the amazing work that you do. I'm now going to introduce Jan Weber, who's our Director of Development. She obviously, one of the questions our supporters often ask us is how are things going financially. Obviously, many charities having huge problems at the moment in the pandemic, raising money. And we are very fortunate to have Jan Weber and her team with us. She is the probably the most experienced maritime fundraiser anywhere in the world. She is doing a remarkable job, including having headed up our Flying Angel campaign, which raised an extraordinary £630,000 in just 14 weeks at a time when we desperately needed it. So Jan, it's over to you to tell us a little bit about how things are going financially and to keep our supporters updated. Jan.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Excuse me. As Director of Development, I'm responsible for a small team of 6 covering fundraising, marketing and communications. We look after all our donors from individuals, companies, churches and trusts, and we handle legacies. We work very closely with Ben and the programme team to ensure stories about seafarers and chaplains reach you, our supporters, and a wider audience. Each January, we hold a team away day where we discuss achievements from the previous year and identify what we could do better in the coming year. We shape and refine our plans to form a strategy. In January 2020, we held our usual away day. Everyone was very enthused about the coming year. There was lots of creativity, discussion and planning as we worked on strategies to raise the money we needed. By mid-March, all of this had changed and we had suddenly faced with not only working remotely, but looking at different ways to raise money. This was all uncharted territory for us. There were lots of unknowns and no one really knew how long the pandemic would last. By mid-April, we knew that events and community fundraising income would be under threat. They both rely on physical gatherings. We were only fortunate that we didn't have a string of charity shops and we didn't engage in mass events with large numbers of people. Charities with this exposure saw their income plummet very quickly. Our highly creative and adaptable team embraced this new challenge we face with positivity, and I'm very proud, a very can-do attitude. We set about working out solutions to the issues facing us. We adapted our event schedule and started our Global Champions Unite, a virtual fundraiser which encouraged people to do their own challenge at home. This not only helped us, but also helped them get through the limitations of lockdown and improved mental wellness and physical fitness. We raised more than 80,000 through this initiative, and we invite you today to devise your own challenge, whether this is a physical activity or something more imaginative. Our next challenge was how to manage Sea Sunday. With churches closed, we knew that this would jeopardize this income for us. We also knew that many looked forward to our services. Under the leadership of Andrew Wright and with the support of Johnny Dowling, we were able to deliver a Sea Sunday online service for all our supporters to enjoy. You will find this on our website if you would like to view it. It does provide a special insight into the global world of the mission, and many who have watched it remarked they hadn't realized how extensive our work was. Our next challenge was the Singapore Seafarers Awards, which Andrew has already mentioned. We were not able to do this physically, so we managed to put on a complex webinar with multiple speakers and videos, similar to what you have today, which reached a global audience, which was great success. And again, you can view this on our website. Throughout the year, we have been concerned for you too, our supporters, and for your well-being. Through FAN, e-newsletters, Andrew's blogs and letters, We hope that you have felt involved and informed with news from across the globe. We thank you for your phone calls, which I know have been important, and we thank you for increasing your direct debits at this most urgent of times to help us to help seafarers. We thank you for your amazing support across the board and for your continued interest in all that we do. Our Flying Angel campaign, supported mainly by the industry trust foundations, but also by you, have raised a phenomenal £650,000 and has ensured the immediate needs of seafarers have been met through these difficult times. We have bought PPE, MiFi units, we've adapted centres and minibuses and so much more. Sadly though, we have lost some of our wonderful friends and we remember them in our prayers. We thank them for remembering us in their wills and leaving us such generous legacies. These names are read at each board meeting to recognise their kind gifts, and in memoriam pages have been set up on our website for special messages. It has without question been an extraordinary year, and the mission has been the focus of much media activity as seafarers were suddenly thrown into the spotlight. Our team has worked phenomenally hard to respond to as many of these inquiries as possible, further enhancing our position as one of the leading and recognised providers of seafarers' welfare globally. The pandemic, as we hear daily, has sadly claimed thousands of lives and disrupted thousands of businesses and livelihoods. Charities have already made thousands of redundancies and projecting huge drops in their income. No one has escaped unscathed and all fear the loss of income when at a time when the demand for services increases exponentially. When our development team meet in January 2021, we face a very different kind of landscape. Firstly, this meeting will be by Zoom, and secondly, there will be much more to reflect over the year. Overall, we will have learnt a huge amount. We will have learnt how to do things differently, to improve efficiencies, and to use technology to reach more supporters through events such as this. We will be able to provide more digital content for churches, provide more videos of our frontline work, reach schools through virtual assemblies, and reach our global industry across the world. Next year, we know that we will move to a more blended approach, using technology, but equally we are all craving those face-to-face meetings when we can share time together. We, like seafarers, have had to adapt. Before I finish, can I draw your attention to our Christmas Festival of Light and Hope, which takes place on the 9th of December. This replaces our Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols, which so many of you have come to enjoy. I hope that you will join us and recognise the important part that seafarers have played in keeping our goods and fuels flowing through this extraordinary year. And finally, your support has enabled us to continue our work during the pandemic and to offer the additional support which seafarers have so desperately needed. We could not have done this without you. We are deeply grateful to you and we thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan, and thank you so much to you and your fantastic team for everything that they've done. We've now got a few minutes for questions, and we obviously have a range of panelists, all of whom you've met already. But I do want to go to Tutankhamun first, to Reverend Isaac Franklin, who hasn't yet appeared live. I hope you're there, Nitin. If you turn your mic on and your camera. There's been a question about the emergency support in Tutankhamun, saying that the work that you've been doing in emergency support is amazing, and asking in what other ways are you able to help seafarer families locally in Tutankhamun, and do you have any plans for the future? Is Isaac there? Yes, there you are. Isaac, over to you.
Yeah. Good evening, one and all from India. It's a wonderful question, actually. Thank you so much for MTSI headquarters to supporting Tuticorin seafarers. Apart from the feeding the needy families affected by COVID-19 lockdown at Tuticorin, we are also already providing support such as tuition center for the children and sewing center for the women of the local seafaring and fishing communities. This has drastically strengthened our mission relationship with the local seafaring communities. So we have also future plans such as starting a computer training center for educating them in a digital communication and cashless transaction. We see that in many families, they do not know these digital facilities. With no knowledge of internet banking, they stand in a long queue to pay their utility bills and wait for a long time in the bank for receiving and sending monies. So our effort to educate them, especially the seafarers' families, wife and daughters, educated them through this computer training center will make a great change in their life in future. I think this is a suggestion from the seafarers' family members' side. Andrew.
Thank you very much. Another question. I'm going to head over to Ben Bailey now. To a question: how long do you expect current issues to go on for seafarers? I mean, we're still in the midst of this crisis. Ben, how do you see the road ahead, and what might that mean for Mission to Seafarers?
I think that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? You know, there is a UN Security Council resolution which is currently making its way through the UN in the hope that more countries will recognize seafarers as key workers. And hopefully the more countries that do that, the more seafarers will be able to be repatriated home. But at the moment, we only have a list of around 13 or 14 countries which have registered recognized seafarers as key workers, and therefore are allowing them to be repatriated through their seaports and airports. So it's very difficult. For the mission, I think it will be expanding our digital chaplaincy services and continuing to be that digital friend for seafarers. So many of them, as you've heard from Nitin and from all the speakers today, are reaching out to us on a regular basis, wanting to allay their fears and their concerns and share their concerns with what's happening at home, but also with their jobs and their futures. So for us, the task will only increase over the coming months, but rest assured we will be there to support them through that whole process.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. We understand that still between 300,000 and 400,000 seafarers are still working beyond their contract. So that situation is far from resolved. And one of the big questions going forward, and I was on a meeting this week about this, is about the vaccine. Vaccinating seafarers when the vaccine comes is going to be challenging, particularly as often you have to have 2 vaccines a month apart. And certainly we've offered our support. If our local teams and centres can be of help in that process, we're certainly keen to be able to do that. Going over to Andy now. Andy, there's been a question here, a couple of questions for you. One is about whether or not you keep in touch with some of the seafarers you help after they go back home. And secondly, someone's asking about what plans there are for the MESA region in the future.
We do indeed stay in touch with seafarers when they return home. And very occasionally, we get to reconnect with them. So I was fortunate last year to visit India, and as part of that visit was able to meet with a seafarer and his family who we'd helped to repatriate after he'd spent 19 months, I think it was, on board a ship at Anchorage, waiting for that repatriation. So that was a very joyful occasion. And then plans for the region. Well, we're very keen to get into some of the perhaps more difficult to reach ports around the region, but also to make sure we have coverage right around the Middle East and South Asia. So I'm just back from a short visit to Egypt, where we've made some good progress in reaccessing Port Said, which was one of the ports we first started at back in 1885. We have identified somebody to open some work, or to try and open some work for us in Israel, in the ports of Haifa and Ashdod, based out of Jaffa. And there's plans to try and do something creative and imaginative in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, where we've been approached by a large shipping company to come and consider running welfare services. And we're very keen to get into Basra in Iraq, which was another of those original ports that we came to back in the 19th century. So lots of potential, lots of possibilities. Let's see what the world looks like in 2021 and how that might be possible.
Thank you very much, Andy. Nitin, question about Chat to a Chaplain. Does it have a facility for you to see the seafarer who you're talking with? And if not, might that be possible in future? And how difficult is it ministering to people in that way when you can't actually see them? Put your microphone on, Nitin. Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, at the moment, we don't have the facility to see the seafarer. It's only on chat. But if that can be incorporated in the future, it would go a long way, to connecting with the seafarer when they contact us with their difficulties, with their issues. So that would really be helpful if we can have that facility. Thank you, Nitin. And obviously, one of the issues is availability of communication on ship and the bandwidth, which is what's made it so difficult at this stage, but may become more possible in the future. Jan, with a question with increased emphasis on digital communication, how will you ensure that those who don't have access to technology continue to receive information? Perhaps a question close to the hearts of some of our supporters.
Yes. Well, excuse me. Well, we recognise that not everybody has access to digital communication, but the mission hasn't stopped its physical communications either. We continue to produce FAN, for instance, in a hard copy as well as a soft copy. Our appeals and legacy campaigns also come out in both formats. We believe the pandemic and subsequent drive in digital communications has actually given us far more opportunities now to communicate with our donors. Our plan is to produce more videos for churches so that they can play during services that we have been routinely unable to fill all the speaker engagements that we get asked for. This will help us provide more information to larger numbers. So digital communications also allows us to save money on printing and postage, but equally, we are fully appreciative that our donors like to receive hard copies of FAN and other forms of communication. So we will still be continuing to do both levels of communication so that you get, so our supporters receive it in the format that they want.
Thank you, Jan. We're coming up to the end of our hour now, and I just want to say a huge thank you to you all for joining us. I'll say thank you again in a minute, but we thought it'd be appropriate to close with a couple of prayers. It is all our work around the world is undergirded by our strong sense of Christian purpose. Our ministry, as you've seen, is incredibly holistic, but beneath it all lies that strong sense of Christian purpose. And I'm going to read a prayer. It's an old Mission to Seafarers prayer. And then I think Johnny, I hope we can still try and play the snippet from the online Sea Sunday service of the Lord's Prayer. If the picture doesn't quite work, so be it. But let's try it anyway, which is one of the things that we featured in the summer. And then I'll close with a short blessing. Lord and Heavenly Father, we commend to your keeping all who sail the seas. Guard them in danger, sustain them in loneliness, and support them in sickness and anxiety. Bless all who minister to their bodily and spiritual needs, and guide us all to the haven of eternal life, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Our Lord Jesus has taught us, and so we pray.
Pai nosso que está no céu,
Pagdaigo ng imong ngalan.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
Gelijk in de hemel als ook op de aarde.
Bigyan mo kami ngayon ng aming kakanin sa araw-araw.
En vergeef ons ons skulde, soos ons ook ons skuldenaars vergewe.
Má fà wá sínú ìdẹwò, ṣùgbọ́n gbà wá lọ́wọ́ bìlísì.
For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory,
forever and ever.
Amen.
And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be with you and those whom you love, this and every day.
And so may the road rise to meet you, may the sun shine always on your face, may the wind be always at your back, and may the rain fall softly on your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Amen. Thank you so much to you all. It's been absolutely brilliant to be with you. We're going to reflect on this now and see what's worked and what hasn't. And we hope to run another of these supporter events in about 3 months' time. In the meantime, we look forward to keeping in close touch with you, and thanks so much to you all. Cheerio.